She is not your best friend. Check the photos on your husband's old phone. That was the message. No greeting. No name. No explanation. Just those words, stark and chilling, sitting on my screen like a whisper from a ghost. At first, I laughed. It felt absurd. Something that might come from a scammer, a spam bot, or maybe someone trying to stir drama for fun. I even showed it to my coworker during our lunch break, and we both shrugged it off as some random internet nonsense. I deleted it and moved on. Or at least, I tried to. But that night, when I was brushing my teeth, I found myself thinking about it again. Not because I believed it, but because of the tone. The words were not dramatic or desperate. They were flat, calm, almost confident. It did not feel like a joke. It felt like someone telling me something they thought I needed to know. I glanced at the door to the bedroom. My husband was already asleep, one arm thrown over his pillow, chest rising and falling in that steady rhythm I had grown to find so comforting. My phone buzzed softly from the bathroom counter. I picked it up, but there was no new message. Just the memory of the last one. My best friend's photo was still framed on our hallway wall. Her smile lit up the space beside mine. She had been there through everything. She had stood beside me in my wedding gown. She had held my hand during my child's birth. She was like a sister to me. My husband had always adored her too. We were a trio, inseparable, unbreakable. Or at least, that was what I believed. I met Vanessa during my first week at university. We were both lost, literally, trying to find the same lecture hall. She wore a burgundy sweater 2 sizes too big, and I remember she had a coffee stain on her jeans. She smiled at me like we had known each other forever, and just like that, we clicked. She offered to share her notes, even though I was a stranger. By the end of the week, we were spending nearly every free moment together. We studied, ate cheap ramen in our dorms, cried over failed exams, and danced barefoot in our shared apartment when we passed them. She was the sister I never had, the one constant when everything else felt uncertain. Vanessa stayed in my life after university. When I met Daniel, she was the first person I told. She scrutinized his social media like an overprotective sibling, teasing me but making sure I felt safe. I remember the night she met him. We had gone to dinner, and she wore this red dress that made heads turn. I joked that if Daniel looked at her for too long, I might have to fight him. She laughed and rolled her eyes, telling me not to be ridiculous. That night, the 3 of us stayed up playing board games and eating ice cream straight from the carton. That became a routine. When Daniel proposed, Vanessa cried almost as much as I did. She took over the wedding planning like it was her personal mission. She made spreadsheets, scouted venues, and vetoed my dress choices with brutal honesty and the kind of love that only comes from years of friendship. On my wedding day, she stood beside me as my maid of honor, adjusting my veil and whispering that everything would be perfect. She gave a toast that made everyone laugh, then cry, and then laugh again. She said she loved Daniel like a brother. She said she would always protect our marriage. After I had my daughter, Lily, Vanessa was the first person at the hospital. She held Lily with tears in her eyes and promised to always be her auntie. When Daniel had to go on a work trip a few months later, Vanessa moved in for a week to help me. She cooked, changed diapers, and stayed up with me during sleepless nights. She made me feel less alone in those foggy, exhausting days of new motherhood. We started a tradition, Sunday dinners at our house. Vanessa never missed one. She brought wine, desserts, and stories about her dating misadventures. Sometimes, she stayed late and watched movies with us. Other times, she helped me fold laundry or paint Lily's toenails. On holidays, she traveled with us. We shared hotel rooms. We shared secrets. When Daniel and I argued, Vanessa was the one I called. She listened without judgment and always tried to make peace. She told me love was messy but worth it. I saw the way people admired our friendship. I used to feel proud of it. People envied how close we were. I would hear comments like, "You two are more like sisters," or "Everyone needs a Vanessa." I believed that. I believed it with my whole heart. But now, with the message still fresh in my mind, I started to remember things differently. There was the time Vanessa showed up to our anniversary dinner because she said she forgot we had plans. She laughed it off, but her eyes flicked toward Daniel too often that night. Then there was the weekend she and Daniel ran errands together while I stayed home with Lily. She said it was more efficient. I did not question it. Why would I? Once, during a beach trip, I caught her watching Daniel from behind her sunglasses. I told myself I imagined it. After all, she had never given me any reason not to trust her. I remembered one night, a few years ago, when Daniel came home unusually late. Vanessa had texted that she was feeling sick, so I thought maybe he had stopped to check on her. He said he had just worked late and seemed tired, distracted. I never asked again. There was also the time I walked into the room and found them laughing over something on his phone. The moment I entered, they went quiet. Daniel locked the screen. Vanessa said it was just a meme. I smiled and nodded, but I felt something strange in my chest that I pushed away. I ignored those little moments. I chose to believe in the people I loved. Vanessa would never do anything to hurt me. Daniel loved me, I was sure of it. They were my family. The thought of them together in any other way never crossed my mind. But now, sitting on the couch while Lily slept upstairs and Daniel snored softly in our bedroom, I could feel something cracking inside me. That message, those words, they were pulling at threads I had been too blind to see. Vanessa, my best friend, my sister in all but blood, had she really been hiding something from me all along? And if she had, what else had I missed? Daniel and I met at a friend's birthday party. It was one of those chaotic gatherings where music blared too loudly and everyone shouted to be heard. He was standing by the kitchen counter, sipping soda from a red plastic cup, and looking just as out of place as I felt. We locked eyes during a lull in the music, and he smiled, this quiet, warm smile that made everything else fade into the background. We started talking, and what began as a 5-minute conversation stretched into hours. We ended up leaving the party together, not to go anywhere, just to walk and talk under the stars. He was thoughtful, kind, and patient. The kind of man who listened without interrupting and remembered every little thing I said. He brought flowers on random days, wrote me notes on yellow sticky pads, and held my hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. He met Vanessa a few weeks later, and she teased me for blushing when he complimented my laugh. They got along instantly, and I felt lucky that the two people I loved most in the world also liked each other. Our love grew slowly but deeply. We built a relationship on long talks, shared dreams, and quiet moments. When Daniel proposed, it was in our favorite park, the same one where we had spent so many lazy Sunday afternoons. He got down on one knee beside the old fountain, and I said yes before he could finish the question. We bought a small house in a quiet neighborhood. It was not perfect, but it was ours. We painted the walls together, argued about furniture, and celebrated every milestone like it was a holiday. When I became pregnant with Lily, Daniel cried. He spent nights reading parenting books, attending doctor appointments, and building the crib with his own hands. He used to rest his head on my belly and talk to her. He called her his little star. Daniel and I had routines. Morning coffee before the world woke up. Movie nights on Fridays. Long walks on Saturdays. Sunday dinners with Vanessa. We split the chores, supported each other's careers, and tried to always say, I love you, before going to bed, no matter how tired or annoyed we were. He made me feel safe. Like no matter what happened, we would face it together. But recently, things had shifted. At first, it was small. He started taking his phone with him everywhere, even to the bathroom. He used to leave it on the kitchen counter or nightstand without a second thought, but now it never left his side. I asked him once if something was wrong, and he brushed it off, saying work had become more demanding. I believed him. He had been under a lot of pressure with a big project. It made sense. Then he became quieter at dinner. He would look at his phone and smile at messages he never showed me. If I asked who it was, he would say a coworker or someone from his fantasy football group. I did not press him. I did not want to be that kind of wife, the one who snoops or demands explanations over every little thing. I trusted him. I had always trusted him. There were nights when he claimed he had to stay late at work, but he came home looking too refreshed, too content. He smelled like fresh soap, not office dust or stress. I told myself I was overthinking. Daniel would never cheat. He had promised me forever. He had been my anchor through every storm. When I brought up how distant he seemed, he held me and said he was just tired. He kissed my forehead and whispered that he loved me. I held on to those words. I wrapped them around me like a blanket, trying to ignore the chill that had started to settle in my bones. He still played with Lily. Still helped with groceries. Still watched our shows, even if he seemed distracted sometimes. There was no obvious sign of betrayal. Nothing glaring. Just a subtle, growing distance. I blamed work. I blamed time. I blamed myself. Maybe I had not been present enough. Maybe motherhood had made me lose parts of the woman he fell in love with. Looking back, I see how I talked myself out of every red flag. I wanted to believe in the man I married. I wanted to believe that our love was still whole, even if a little bruised. I never imagined that the real wound had already begun to bleed, hidden just beneath the surface. Now, the pieces were starting to rearrange themselves in my mind, and what once looked like love now cast strange shadows. My husband had secrets. I just did not know how deep they went. The message appeared again. It was late on a Tuesday night. I had just finished cleaning the kitchen, and Daniel was already upstairs getting Lily ready for bed. I wiped my hands on a towel and picked up my phone. The screen lit up with a new text, and when I opened it, my heart stopped. She is not your best friend. Check the photos on your husband's old phone. The same message. Word for word. But this time, it came from a blocked number. No name, no identifying detail. Just the exact same sentence, as though someone had copied and pasted it directly from the first time I saw it. I stared at it for several minutes, frozen. My fingers hovered over the screen, unsure whether to delete it or reply. I did neither. I locked the phone and placed it face down on the counter, trying to calm the sudden rush of anxiety pressing against my ribs. When Daniel came downstairs, he kissed my cheek, made a joke about Lily demanding 3 bedtime stories, and walked into the living room to watch television. He looked calm, ordinary, normal. But that message had lit a fuse inside me that would not go out. That night, I could not sleep. I lay awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling, listening to Daniel's steady breathing beside me. My mind kept circling the message. It repeated itself like a whisper in the dark, never growing louder, only more insistent. She is not your best friend. Check the photos on your husband's old phone. I tried to dismiss it again. Tried to convince myself that someone was playing a cruel trick. But something inside me had shifted. A feeling I could not name had taken root, and it would not let me rest. I kept thinking about the drawer in the hallway closet. The one with tangled cords, unused chargers, and old devices we never got around to throwing away. There had been a phone in there. Daniel's old phone, the one he stopped using a couple of years ago when he upgraded. It was just sitting there, untouched, forgotten. At least, I had assumed it was forgotten. The next morning, after Daniel left for work and Lily was dropped off at school, I stood in front of that drawer. My hand hovered over the handle. I felt ridiculous. I told myself I was overreacting. But still, I opened it. The phone was there, buried under a pile of old receipts and tangled headphones. I picked it up slowly, holding it like it might burn me. It was dusty, the screen smeared and the case scratched. I took it into the kitchen and found a compatible charger in the same drawer. As it started charging, the black screen lit up with a familiar logo. My stomach tightened. I told myself I would only look for a minute, just to ease the doubt, just to put the message to rest. When the home screen appeared, it did not require a passcode. I remembered Daniel telling me once that he had never set one up on that device. I was grateful, but also unsettled by how easy it was. Like the phone had been waiting for me. I opened the gallery. The photos were exactly what I expected at first. Pictures of Lily as a baby, us at the park, family holidays, random shots of food, smiling selfies, Daniel holding our daughter, beaming with pride. Vanessa in the background of several photos, laughing, smiling, always present. She was in so many of our memories. I kept scrolling. The timeline moved backward. Birthdays, beach vacations, Christmas mornings. Then I noticed something strange. A group of photos, dated during a time when I remembered Vanessa being out of town visiting her mother. In these photos, she was not with family. She was with Daniel. They were at a restaurant I had never seen before, sitting across from each other, their faces lit by candlelight. She was wearing a red dress, and he was smiling at her in a way I had not seen in a long time. There were no other people in the pictures, just the two of them. My fingers trembled as I tapped through the next set. More photos. Vanessa sitting on Daniel's lap, her head resting on his shoulder. A blurry shot of them kissing in what looked like a hotel room. My throat closed. I felt like I had been punched. This was not friendship. This was not innocent. I kept scrolling, and with each swipe, my world cracked further. Photos of them lying in bed, faces close, hair tousled. Vanessa wearing one of Daniel's shirts. Daniel taking mirror selfies with her arms wrapped around him from behind. I closed the gallery and dropped the phone on the table. My chest hurt. My legs felt weak. I had to sit down before I collapsed. They had been together. Not once. Not a mistake. Not a one-time lapse in judgment. This had been going on for months. Maybe longer. It had been right in front of me the entire time. And the worst part was, she had been my best friend. My confidant. She had held my hand through the hardest days. She had stood beside me on my wedding day. She had smiled at my child like she was family. She had sat in my kitchen, eating my food, laughing with my husband. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something. But instead, I sat in silence, holding my face in my hands while the weight of it all pressed down on me. The message had not been a joke. It had not been spam. It had been the truth, sent by someone who knew something I did not. Someone who had tried to warn me. And I had ignored it. Now I could not pretend anymore. The trust one had in both of them was gone. The life I thought I was living had been built on a lie. And I had only just begun to understand how deep that lie went. I could not stay away from the phone. Even after the first wave of shock, the need to know more pulled at me like a tide I could not escape. My hands moved on their own, picking it up again, unlocking it, going deeper. The gallery app was still open, still resting on the last photo I had seen. Vanessa curled against Daniel in a hotel room bed. The timestamp told me it had been taken nearly 8 months ago. That alone was enough to shatter something inside me, but I needed to see the full truth. I needed to know how far it went. I tapped into the album section and saw a folder simply labeled, Private. It was hidden, tucked away beneath travel folders and work-related images. When I opened it, it was like falling into a pit that had no bottom. There were dozens of photos. More than I could count at once. Some of them were casual, Vanessa and Daniel having coffee together, sitting side by side on a park bench, holding hands in a car. Others were more intimate. Far more intimate. I found myself staring at a series of photos that could never be explained away. Pictures of them in bed together. Daniel kissing her shoulder. Vanessa taking selfies while Daniel slept beside her, unaware. They were half-dressed or wrapped in hotel sheets. One showed Daniel holding a small piece of paper with Happy Anniversary written on it, and Vanessa's lipstick print next to the words. My breath hitched. Anniversary. That word broke something new open inside me. I tried to recall what had been happening in our lives when that photo was taken. I remembered being home with Lily while Daniel said he had a work retreat. I remembered feeling lonely that week, but trusting him because he had always been the reliable one. The dependable one. I closed the folder and leaned against the kitchen counter. My whole body felt weak. I needed air, but I could not move. I just stood there, shaking, as the images played again and again behind my eyes. Still, some part of me needed to see more. Some part of me could not walk away until I understood everything. I went back into the gallery, but this time I opened the file manager on the phone. I knew enough about smartphones to check the recently deleted folder. I had no hope, really. I assumed Daniel would have been careful. But when I opened it, my heart dropped. There were videos. Not many, only 3, but each one was several minutes long. I hesitated, staring at the first thumbnail. It showed Vanessa's face as she adjusted the camera, then turned to Daniel. They were on a bed. She was laughing. He was shirtless. The room looked like a rental. Generic artwork on the walls, no personal touches. Just a place to hide. I could not bring myself to watch it. I deleted it permanently, then the others. Not because I wanted to protect them, but because I could not bear to see what I already knew. The evidence was overwhelming. They had not just betrayed me once. This was not a single mistake, a lapse in judgment. This was a full-blown affair. It had depth. It had time. It had memories. And it had happened while I had been blind. I sat on the floor of my kitchen and tried to breathe, but my thoughts would not stop racing. I began to piece everything together, remembering all the moments that had once felt slightly off and now made a terrible kind of sense. The night Daniel came home late with no explanation and smelled faintly of perfume. I had asked, and he had smiled and said he had hugged one of his coworkers goodbye. The weekend Vanessa had cried to me about feeling alone and needing space from dating, and then disappeared without telling anyone where she had gone. The way she sometimes paused before answering when I asked if she would be at dinner. The times Daniel's mood had shifted abruptly after seeing her. The way they sometimes exchanged glances when they thought I was not paying attention. It was all there. The signs had been right in front of me, but I had trusted too easily. I had believed too deeply. I had assumed that love and loyalty were enough to protect what we had built. I remembered a night, nearly 2 years ago, when Vanessa stayed over after a late movie night. Daniel had gone to bed early. Or so I thought. I had fallen asleep on the couch with a blanket over me, and when I woke up around 3 in the morning, Vanessa was not on the guest bed where I had left her. I had searched for her, half asleep, and eventually found her asleep in Lily's room. I had smiled at the time, assuming she had gone in there to comfort Lily after a bad dream. Now I wondered what had really happened that night. Had she slipped into our bedroom first? Had she been with Daniel while I slept, barely 15 feet away? The betrayal burned more deeply each time I recalled a moment that no longer felt innocent. Vanessa holding Lily in her arms and calling herself Auntie V. Daniel toasting her at a family barbecue and calling her part of the tribe. The two of them decorating our house together for the holidays when I was out shopping. The way Vanessa always knew what snacks Daniel liked, how he liked his coffee, the shows he preferred to watch after a long day. They had known each other far too well. I stood up and closed the gallery app. My hands were ice cold. I felt like a ghost in my own house. Everything I thought I knew had been rewritten. Every memory now had a shadow cast over it, a question mark where there used to be certainty. The phone buzzed in my hand. A notification. A reminder I had set for the parent-teacher meeting later that day. I stared at it blankly, wondering how I was supposed to carry on with normal life when nothing felt real anymore. I had been betrayed. Deeply. Repeatedly. By the two people I had trusted most in this world. There was no going back to how things were. Not now. Not ever. When Daniel walked through the front door that evening, I was already waiting for him. The phone sat beside me on the table, fully charged, its screen dark but its contents burning through my mind like acid. He looked tired. His briefcase hung loosely in his hand, and he let out a soft sigh as he stepped inside. He looked up and met my eyes. Something in my expression must have warned him, because he froze. I did not raise my voice. I did not throw the phone across the room or cry or scream. I just looked at him and asked the question that would change everything. How long have you been sleeping with Vanessa? His face went pale. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Then he laughed. It was a weak, pathetic sound. What? That is, what are you even talking about? I pushed the phone across the table. I charged your old phone. I saw the photos, the videos, the texts. I saw all of it. His knees gave out, and he collapsed into the chair across from me. He stared at the phone like it might bite him. His hand reached out slowly, then pulled back. He looked up at me, eyes wide and wet. Please, just listen. You lied to me, I said, my voice trembling. For how long? He shook his head. I never meant for it to go that far. It just happened. How long? I repeated, louder this time. He rubbed his face. It started almost 3 years ago. But it was not constant. We stopped. Then started again. I thought it was over. I swear, I thought it was over. I stared at him, my heart thudding painfully in my chest. You brought her into our house. You let her hold our daughter. You smiled at me while sleeping with her behind my back. I know, he whispered. I know I am a monster. I waited for him to offer more, an explanation, a reason, something to make sense of the wreckage he had caused. She was just always there, he said quietly. You were tired, busy, focused on Lily, on work, on keeping everything together. And Vanessa, she listened. She looked at me like I mattered. I could hardly believe the words leaving his mouth. So it is my fault? No, I am not saying that. I am just trying to explain. I felt like I was losing you. I felt invisible. And instead of talking to me, you went to her. You had a child with me, and you shared a bed with someone I trusted like a sister. He dropped his head into his hands. It did not mean anything. It was never love. It was just comfort. I was weak. I made the worst mistake of my life. Tears filled my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. You made a choice. Over and over again. This was not weakness. This was betrayal. He looked up, broken and small, but I did not care. I stood and walked away, needing space, needing air. My body ached with anger and heartbreak, with confusion and disbelief. I called Vanessa next. My hands trembled as I dialed. She answered on the second ring, cheerful as ever. Hey, what is up? You need to come over. Now. There was a pause. Then a shift in her tone. Is everything all right? No. Come now. We need to talk. 15 minutes later, she was at my door. She stepped inside like nothing had changed. She looked from me to Daniel, who stood silent behind me, then back at me again. "What is going on?" she asked, her voice tight. I did not waste time. I tossed the phone onto the coffee table. "You have been sleeping with my husband." Her mouth opened, but no sound came. She looked at Daniel, then back at me. "I do not know what you are talking about." I walked to the phone, opened the album, and tapped one of the photos. The screen filled with her smiling face, her hand tangled in Daniel's hair. I held it up. "Do not insult me." Her face changed. The mask dropped. The warmth left her eyes. She crossed her arms and leaned back slightly. "Fine. You found out. So what now?" My chest tightened. "How long?" "Long enough," she said coldly. "You always acted like you were better than everyone, like you had the perfect life. You think people do not notice that? You do not even realize how much you shut him out." I stepped back, shocked by her venom. "I gave him everything. I gave you everything. You planned our wedding. You held our daughter. You sat at my dinner table every week and smiled while lying to my face." She shrugged. "People are not always who you think they are." "No, they are not," I said, my voice hard. "I thought you were my sister. I thought you would be the one person I could trust no matter what." Vanessa rolled her eyes. "I did not plan for it to happen. But maybe if you had paid more attention." "Do not finish that sentence," I said, my voice shaking. "You do not get to blame me for your betrayal." She stared at me, then scoffed and grabbed her purse. "You wanted the truth. Now you have it. Good luck rebuilding your little fairy tale." As she turned and walked out of the house, something inside me shattered completely. The door clicked shut, and the silence that followed felt heavier than any scream. Daniel tried to speak again, but I raised a hand. "I need you to leave. Now." He hesitated. "Please. Let me explain more. Let me fix it." "You cannot fix this. Not now. Not ever. You need to go." He stood frozen, then finally nodded and walked out. When the door shut behind him too, I sank to the floor. My house was quiet. Too quiet. I sat there for a long time, the weight of what I had lost pressing down on me. I had just cut out two people who had meant everything to me, but they had already torn me apart long before I found out the truth. And now, I was left to gather the pieces alone. The next few weeks were a blur of pain, decisions, and quiet heartbreak. After the confrontation, I knew there was no salvaging what had been destroyed. Daniel begged to stay, to work things out, but I could not bear to look at him without seeing the images burned into my memory. I asked him to leave. He moved into a small apartment across town. He still saw Lily on weekends, but we barely spoke beyond what was necessary. The house felt quieter without him, but it also felt cleaner, like I could finally breathe again, even if each breath carried the weight of betrayal. I started therapy a week later. It felt strange at first, sitting in a quiet room with a stranger and unpacking years of what I thought had been a solid life. But the more I spoke, the more I realized how much I had buried, how many little signs I had ignored, how much I had given while asking for nothing in return. My therapist helped me find my footing again. She never judged, never rushed me. She simply held space for the truth I had avoided for far too long. Lily was the hardest part. She was too young to understand the words I wanted to say, but she sensed the difference. One night, as I tucked her into bed, she asked why Daddy did not live with us anymore. My throat tightened. I told her that sometimes even grown-ups make mistakes, and when those mistakes hurt the people they love, it is better to give each other space to heal. She nodded slowly, her eyes wide and trusting. She did not press further. She just held my hand and asked me to stay with her until she fell asleep. I found myself staring at the ceiling late at night, replaying every memory with Vanessa. Every secret smile. Every shared glass of wine. Every time she had listened to my worries while carrying her own lies. It was not just my marriage that had ended. It was the end of a friendship that had felt like family. I had loved her like a sister. Losing her hurt just as much as losing Daniel, maybe more. And in the silence that followed, I kept hearing that message in my head. She is not your best friend. I thought about the person who sent it. I would never know who they were or why they cared enough to warn me. Maybe it was someone who had seen something I missed. Maybe someone had grown tired of watching me live in ignorance. Whoever they were, they had tried to spare me. And I had laughed it off. I had called it spam. I had deleted the first warning and carried on like nothing had changed. I had been wrong. I should have listened. Healing was not a straight line. Some days, I felt strong enough to rearrange the furniture or clear out old drawers. Other days, I could barely bring myself to leave the bed. But slowly, I started rebuilding. I took Lily to the park more often. I reconnected with old friends I had lost touch with. I filled the house with light, with music, with the sound of laughter again. It took time, but the space that had once felt broken began to feel like mine again. One day, I stood in front of the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back at me. Not because I looked different, but because I felt different. Stronger. Wiser. I had been blind for so long, trusting completely in people who had not earned it. I had ignored my instincts. I had dismissed the little things. The way Vanessa sometimes looked at Daniel too long, the way he had grown so guarded with his phone. I had told myself I was overthinking. That I was just tired. That nothing was wrong. But something had been wrong. And now, I promised myself I would never ignore my own intuition again. I did not respond to Daniel's occasional texts asking if we could talk. There was nothing left to say. I did not answer Vanessa's call when she tried to reach out weeks later. I blocked her number. I needed distance. I needed peace. I needed to protect myself. I started journaling every night, writing down the day's events, my feelings, my fears. It helped to empty the pain onto paper, to track the progress I could not always see in the mirror. I wrote about the betrayal, but I also wrote about the strength I was finding, about the love I still had to give, to myself, to Lily, to the future I was slowly reclaiming. I no longer cried every night. I no longer woke up feeling hollow. I smiled more. I danced with Lily in the kitchen again. I started cooking meals just for fun. I made a list of things I wanted to try, things I had pushed aside while being someone else's wife and someone else's best friend. I wanted to travel, to learn a new language, to paint, to live without constantly checking over my shoulder. Sometimes, the hurt came back like a wave, unexpected and sharp. A smell, a song, a memory. But it passed. And with each wave, I learned to stand a little taller. One afternoon, I came across the phone again. I picked it up, turned it over in my hands, and quietly removed the memory card. I placed it in a small box, sealed it, and tucked it away. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I no longer needed the proof. The truth had already changed me. I thought back to that message, the one that started it all. She is not your best friend. Check the photos on your husband's old phone. I should have listened.